welcome to the CollectingCars.com podcast with Chris Harris and Edward Lovett.
Hello, I'm Chris Harris and welcome to the Collecting Cars podcast. Today, with my usual partner Edward Lovett, I have Richard Tuthill, he of Tuthill Porsche fame. So he's along for a chinwag about Porsche and other subjects that he knows, well, I hope, something about. Edward's there wearing a very, very fetching gilet, or gillet, as they say in Devon. And what I will let you into, one secret, is that I am an old friend of Richard. We went to uni together, and therefore there are too many in-jokes, and obviously lots of subjects we can't talk about because they would, well, they're not sort of suitable for a family podcast. But we've knocked about in cars for a long time, and we share passion for similar things. So great to have you here, Richard. You're looking thin as ever. What happened? I mean, somehow he manages to lose weight with age. I don't know how he managed to do that. It's unbelievable.
Well, he seems to have a pastry full of sugar, and we have to have a normal croissant. But he gets to look like that.
His metabolism.
Chris, you drove here. I walked.
Oh, that's a good point. I drove here in my used Bentley. I look like a kind of dusky Arthur Daly. Yeah. So
I thought the Queen was arriving as he came up the North End Road.
The big news is you have just built what for a long time we've called your new shed. But it's not a shed, is it? It's a massive building from which you will now base operations going forwards and hopefully look for some business to pay for it.
Yes, but it is a shed.
It's a greenhouse. It was a greenhouse.
It was a greenhouse, and now it's marginally better. But no, ultimately it's a shed, but it's a very nice shed, and it feels a little strange to be working in such an environment.
So the business was basically your dad servicing Beetles, wasn't it?
That's how it started.
Yeah.
And funnily enough, he's reverted back to type. He is now working on Beetles again, which he loves. And he's, let's say, 50 metres from the new shed. And the original garage is 100 metres away. So we're on the same site. It's always been. It's wonderful.
And Beetles then, was it Paris Peking or something he did? Was it London Sydney?
London Sydney, yeah.
But that was the first time he proved what he could do with a 911.
Well, yeah, he did it in a Beetle.
Did he?
Originally, he wrote to VW in 1975, said, I want to go from London to Sydney, how do I do it? I think they sort of sent a manual and said, do this to a Beetle, which he did, including taking a spare engine on the roof, which he fitted before Dover. so it wasn't a brilliant start. Anyway, yeah, that's how it started. He's done London Sydney 3 times.
Always in a Beetle.
No, once in a Beetle, twice in a Porsche. And the Porsche thing really started. His own Porsche thing, which is what we've now become, started in 1990. So yeah, before that was SCRS's and, the connection to DR Autosport, which was then the Rothmans rally team.
Because that's the other thing people don't know about is that you guys were involved in the fabrication of the Group A Legacies. You were involved in the fabrication of the E30 M3 Prodrive rally cars.
And touring cars.
And the touring cars as well.
So we did SCRS repairs. 959, had a few of them back in the day. M3. 6R4. Rothmans painting on the 6R4. The old man used to do them himself.
So this is all for Prodrive, though?
Yeah, this was all DR Autosport, which was then Prodrive. M3, all of Legacies, every Impreza Group A car. And then we stopped at World Rally Car. And most of it was
L555 BAT.
We scrapped one of Colin McRae's Subaru Legacies. I remember it in the field, literally outside the workshop, and at a certain point, and I've got the picture.
Have you still got the chassis plate?
No.
we could do something with that.
Huge error of judgment. I've got a picture of it on top of Smiths of Bloxham skip lorry on the way to the skip to be crushed. So that was a mistake, as it turns out. But we've done
for the benefit of all the listeners, our head is in our hands now. We're just going, oh.
Yeah. So anyway, we've done a lot of stuff over the years, and we settled eventually on Porsches. And turns out, I don't think it was a bad shout.
That's a great shout. So the Porsche 911 thing, which is now how you make a living. Why is it such a special car? Why does it work? And we've discussed this at length, and I think the one thing you've always said to me is the base vehicle is so high quality, you start at a level that means that if you start to improve it, it only gets better and better and better.
I think that's one thing. I think still, if there's one thing I'd ever say about 911 is it's mentally stimulating, above and beyond any other car to drive. The end. So it's not a bad platform.
Yeah.
As you know, I have the attention span of a newt. Therefore, the idea of driving a BMW sideways, or driving a BMW for that matter, sorry to any BMW owners, apologies, it just bores me to tears, because after about 10 seconds, you can do anything and it won't catch you out. And
Well, so you like the fact that the old Porsche is lurking there, trying to break your legs?
yeah, but it doesn't. It's just a myth.
And I agree with you. That is a myth, isn't it?
A complete myth.
But how much of that is down to modern tyres? I still think a short wheelbase 911 on period rubber on a wet road in 1967 still must have been a handful.
Of course it would have been, but I think actually we see from historic racing, if you put bad tyres on anything and then it rains, you're in the wrong place.
Yeah, for sure.
So, is a 911 any worse? Yeah, drive a 3.3 turbo on a wet road with bad tyres and get it wrong, then it's pretty appalling. But then I don't have much to compare it to. So for me, it's like putting an old pair of gloves on and just crack.
The BMW thing's actually a little bit wrong coming from you, because you once phoned me from my E28 M5 and said this is actually quite good.
Was that when I was driving
That old
around?
black Skip, and you were doing roundabouts in it.
Is
in
that
the
the
middle
one
of
you've
Wales.
still got?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. No,
You said this isn't too bad.
I shouldn't pick out BMW specifically. Front engine rear wheel drive, which includes Escort Mark.
You quite like
Two.
those as well, don't you?
I've only had to go in one. Yes, look, of course they're easy to drive. I think easier to drive,
Yeah.
and therefore it just comes back to my original thing. It's about mental stimulation. What keeps me captivated, and it's having to answer a question behind the steering wheel, and the 911 does that brilliantly.
You also have quite strong views on the types of 911 you like driving on the road, don't you?
Yeah, but I'm not hugely experienced, so I get.
You're not hugely experienced.
Well, I don't. You drive, as do you, Ed. You drive lots of cars, and you will have driven probably every 911 variant, where I very rarely get exposed to newer stuff.
Modern 911s or
Yeah,
modern cars?
Yeah, and I think they're wonderful, all 911s, but I don't have the exposure you guys do.
But when we've discussed what makes a nice road car, the spec seems to become more and more basic. You go narrower body, thinner tyres, smaller capacity engines that rev nicely but also give you decent torque. I can remember when we finished the green car that we made together, God knows how many years ago.
I
Kermit.
found some videos of that on
There was a
the
moment.
server.
Did you?
the other
Okay,
day.
right.
Quite good.
There was. We'll get into that in a minute. There was a moment at the end of it where we went, "Wow, it's finished. It's pretty special." And you went, "Yeah, I wish it was like a narrow body with 200 horsepower." Well, we better start again.
So
then.
what won't be known in the circles outside the very small sort of hot rod Porsche community, with obviously Singer and Ruff names known by everyone now, but Richard has been building hot road cars for some time now, and has got quite a name for yourself for people coming for bespoke builds.
Yeah, we do a little bit of it. And I got an email from a chap the other day who bought one of our cars. He's lots of 911s. He sent me a very nice note just saying what an amazing handling car it is. So I think there's two, maybe three elements to any road car.
But the engine's shite.
Actually, brilliant. As it turns out, that was good as well. So your engine is a key factor in any car, but in my opinion, the least important. Chassis handling,
Yeah.
all that stuff, very important. And the one thing, so we have an interesting chat about what we like in a chassis. The one thing that bugs me most is comfort, and by that I include road noise. Can you be on the phone on the inside of the car whilst driving? Do I want to drive one of those cars 3 hours, or would I just rather get in a turbo diesel Golf, which don't really exist anymore? I guess they probably don't make them anymore. But it's this comfort, and you've driven in a very, very comfortable car today, and you could be on the phone all the way. Could you do that in an early car? Would you want to? And I don't know the answer.
What kills me about modern performance cars is just that there's been this marketing-led need to have ever bigger wheel rims. That gives you a skinnier sidewall, smaller sidewalls with lower profile tyres. You've got less compliance in the sidewall. Then you go for lowered suspensions and stiffer suspensions to give this sense of a very, very direct drive, a car that's super agile, almost hyper agile, too agile. And you end up with no ride comfort at all in the car. And I don't understand it. You drive, a 5 Series BMW and you just think, well, what are they thinking of here? I want to be comfortable.
This comes from a man with 22-inch rims on his Bentley outside.
Yeah, but it's on air suspension, isn't it? She's a slack old girl. One thing that I learned working with Richard, we met a guy called Graham Gleeson, bless him, he's not here, from XTC Suspension. He's passed on now. He was a bit of a visionary, mercurial character, and he taught me that ride comfort and level handling are not sort of that, they're mutually compatible. They're not incompatible. You can create a suspension system that's level, flat, and direct, and still have ride comfort. You don't need to just basically fire loads of compression damping and have a stiff spring. It doesn't need to be that way. And since we did that, and that was with the green car in 2007, I've become more critical of road suspensions in modern cars. I don't understand why they have to be so stiff. I just don't understand it at all.
It's got to be down to the amount of money they'll put into dampers. Or is it driven by... It's very interesting when you speak to clients who've got lots of cars. Bearing in mind, everybody in this room has access to many different cars. A lot of guys like this stiff feeling because they think for that couple of hours they're driving their special car that they're in some sort of a race car and it's all a bit racy and edgy, and it's because they know no better. When you're trying to speak to someone about, we want to make it a bit soft, actually a lot of the time say no, I like that.
But I also I have sympathy for that particular opinion in that situation, that if that vehicle is the one that you take out 3 o'clock on a Sunday when you've washed up the dishes and you want to go and blow your cobwebs out, if you want it to feel hyper agile, very stiff, very uncompliant, maybe that's...
I think for modern cars, if you're used to driving a BMW or a turbo diesel Golf daily and you get into a GT3 RS and it's sort of shaking your teeth out, it sort of makes you feel like you're in something,
so those
a bit
cars,
racy.
You can probably excuse it a bit more in those cars, but then you go and get in I've just got rid of an E63 Estate, which I loved. It's a great car, but the ride at low speed was busy. You're there thinking, how do we use estate cars? Well, they do a lot of trundling about at low speed, don't they? And you'd see a bump and wince before you'd hit it. Once you got moving and the damper could work, then it was very, very supple actually. But at low speed, I just don't understand it. And you sit with chassis engineers from car companies who can't really justify it either. They just say, well, the marketing people want it to sit really low.
I remember watching some of your videos in more recent years. I think it was probably the 430 Scuderia when they first put the button to soften the suspension, and it was the quickest way around the track is in race mode, but with the softer suspension.
But this is the ultimate elitist statement. But when you get in a new Ferrari, what's the first thing you do? You press the bumpy road button, don't you? Because otherwise the thing's unusable, I think.
Absolutely, yeah.
I did with this project we're both involved in, I had a day, a couple of hours on local roads I know well, with an engineer who was working on engine mapping. And we got talking about sport.
This is, by the way, the Singer DLS. So Richard and I work on the design lightweight study, which is what they're calling the new Singer. It's a very expensive vehicle. There's basically a ground up new project. There's an all new engine, a totally new chassis. It's being co-developed with Williams. This is what he's talking about.
Yeah.
And they've come to you, Richard, for chassis development.
No, I'm just generally helping across various areas of the car. So
that word's open to interpretation, depending on who you work.
Helping, valeting,
whatever.
But I must say, it's a privilege to be involved. B, an extremely exciting car, and all of these all these features that we're discussing now, actually are very relevant to this car, and I think this car deals with most of it. But it's not easy to achieve. The interesting thing about hanging around with the guy on engine mapping, we were talking about sport mode, and this, bear in mind, every high-end car has a sport mode type button thing, including the Macan.
Yeah.
That my lovely
The old
wife.
Benters outside's got a sport mode. Why you need it, I don't. Just ridiculous.
But if Ruth presses the sport mode button, she's terrified. She hates it because the response actually is a bit over the top.
But they also press the button as they've got throttle on, so it jumps forward always, doesn't it? Because the throttle shortens.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
The car goes.
But all of that stuff, and it's interesting. I guess why do we need sport modes? I don't really know actually.
Just to add a button in there, for me, I think you remove as many electric buttons as possible in the car to make it as simple as possible.
I think rather than sport mode, you might want to offer people a shorter throttle throw, if that's the way they like the pedal to be. But dressing it up as a sport mode is a moot point for me.
Or is it driven by emissions so that they have to have this cycle? So if they press that, then
no, that's all dealt with on startup. I mean, they're having to calm down on that, aren't they?
Anyway, it's probably a thing of the past. We're not going to have to worry for much longer. So if you come back to an early car...
No, you will, because don't forget, there's a new interpretation of that. You get into Tesla, you've got ludicrous mode, being a dickhead mode, whatever you call it.
Yeah.
So there's always going to be this need to give you these steps in performance, because the punter quite likes it. And it all originates from probably Knight Rider, or something like that,
Brilliant.
It does, because as a kid, the concept of having a naughty button you could press that you felt made the car's DNA alter slightly, that reaches into all of our inner child, and I think that's what they're after. They're trying to get into that.
I think for people that don't have access to lots of cars, if you're lucky enough to buy a Carrera 2 911 as your everyday car, and you drop your wife off at work or your son off at school, and then you're by yourself in the car and you can press a number of buttons and turn it into a different experience, that's quite an interesting offering.
Yeah, I think all of those sentiments, when you discuss them, make you realise that these are marketing-led emotional decisions as much as they are engineering ones. I think, like you, my ideal performance car would give me no options, because I still feel that the best cars I've driven operate on the widest bandwidth. They're the super talents. You get into an E46 M3, and it has got a sport button which slightly shortens the throttle, but ultimately the spring and damper is fixed. There's no damping going on, and the engine has a mode. It just is an engine, and it's a great car. It just feels homogenous. It feels like everything worked together. The people that finished that car really knew what they were talking about, and it doesn't need buttons to do extra stuff because it does it all brilliantly.
I think the other thing is that you actually need more than... How many cars do you need to cover off all these things we're talking about?
Because actually
you need lots of cars. That's
so you answered
this over the bank holiday weekend. You need two vehicles. You need a 1957 2CV with a fabric back to it, and you need an Aprilia 209 bike for when you're on your own. So basically, the 2CV takes care of all of your sort of family practical needs.
How would you have got here today in your 2CV?
I just have less yesterday.
Now, time's not something you have a lot of, and if you do, then you use it very badly. So that's.
But you're quite right. You do. How many cars do you need? An estate car? This is now we're now on a different subject. You need an estate car.
Yes.
You need a sports car of some sort. And that could be anything from a Caterham, a fun car.
Yeah.
And I think you need a really comfy car. That's
and a short wheelbase 911. Obviously,
everyone needs.
Sadly, we can't afford them anymore, Richard, because some people have been pumping the prices up to the point where we can't afford them anymore. Okay,
that's all.
I'm now going to do a massive diversion, segue into prices of 911s and how they have been contorted by eligibility for particular types of racing, like the value of a 65 car versus a 66 car. Does that make the 66 car, so for the avoidance of doubt, a 65 car is eligible for pretty much any kind of racing around the world, because the championships tend to be eligible for cars up to 65. So 66 cars are much cheaper than 65 cars, but they're ultimately very similar.
Ish.
Go on then.
What, similar-ish? Or they're the same?
What he's just said is a bit of an ish, as in, you can use non-65 cars. The point being, and it's not. I don't think it's driven by the race series particularly.
If you want to do a Peter Auto event or
2 litre cup,
Goodwood,
yeah.
Anywhere like that, you need a 65 car.
If they're strict, that's true. However, I think you can have a 65 spec
there's an imaginary. I think it's imaginary. I perhaps ought to know, but 305-100 is a chassis number. Anything before that is deemed acceptable, and that takes you well into 66.
Does
models.
it?
But it's still nonsense because basically, up to end of 68, they're all the same. I mean, there's a bit of anoracking going on where door handles and various things, but they're plus or minus the same. What's driving the pricing, and I have discussions on a weekly basis with clients and new clients, is early cars, which brings you on to this
The proper 901.
64, 65 stuff, matching numbers.
You love a bit of that, don't you?
Which is
don't
a
get us back onto
glorious
that
subject, and that's about it. The point being, it's all nonsense. And if you present a car to the FIA these days, we don't want to talk about them, but if you're saying what you're saying is that car complies to that document.
Yeah.
So we could take that lovely Stratos, that actual car, turn it into a short wheelbase 911. I don't know how we do it. We could, and you could present it, and you would get FIA papers. Now the thing is,
What papers would you get?
you get full on FIA
Would you?
papers. Yeah, there's no FIA paper is FIA paper. There's a little bit of paper in the back that you get if it was a period car. You get a bit of history and some photos. Right. If Goodwood have availability for 20 cars, and Chris, you turn up with your original 64 901, and you turn up with a 67
My Stratos rebodied as a 911.
Yeah. If they got 20 cars of the correct period, they will want them.
Yeah.
Unless you put some legend in it to drive it.
Yeah.
I think the price is actually being driven by, not the racing market, it's being driven by collectors who want lovely early cars, and they want the matching numbers and they want them early. That means those are all hived off and already a lot of money. And then we're left with whatever we can get a hold of.
So do you think 67, 68 cars are going to get dragged up now? Because according to your theory, they should, but they don't really, because I think
you're talking about race cars and eligibility, which is very different to driving around in a 68 road car that's been sorted or not sorted, because a 65 race car that Richard's built that you can go to Goodwood and dance around on the circuit is a very different thing to an unrestored 65 road car.
They are. They're linked a little bit in that there's only so many of them, so if a lot of them are getting sucked into road cars or race cars or whatever, then we're dealing with what's left. The reality is, we're always talking about the donor, the base car. Once you've got your base car, to convert it into a lovely road car, restore it to an original car, or go racing, the cost is the cost.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter whether it's a 68 or a 65. You've still got to fire 1,000 hours in it and however many tens of thousands of pounds of parts. So we're really what gives us the variety in pricing is how much can we buy the base car for, and I guess that's the same with whatever.
Have you exhausted America yet?
No, I bought a lovely car the other day, matching numbers, engine, gearbox, and stamped doors, 65.
Really?
What a peach! Yeah.
For
Go on
sale,
then.
obviously.
How much?
We couldn't have a conversation of that off air.
How much?
Sold. Bought and sold in a week.
Edward
Edward would be very jealous of that. So they're out. They are still out there.
Thanks for the call.
The thing is, the old man was buying these 15 years ago at £5,000.
Yeah.
And we're paying closer to 80 now for the same thing. Only in most cases, the cars he were buying were way better than the cars we're buying. So we're paying more, getting less.
Yeah.
But they're still out there. So everyone can relax. There's plenty in the world. They made a lot
In the middle of
They did
Arizona
make a few, didn't they?
Oregon and
How many of these 2-litre Cup cars have you made?
We've built, I reckon, 15, 20 in the last 3 years, something like that.
And the circuit thing is quite new for you, isn't it? I remember discussing with you over a couple of beers. Richard's a famously brilliant drinker, not. So we're sort of 3 lagers in, and he's already falling off the stool.
All right, Chris, no need
and I remember
to
saying
go
to
into
him, you make these rally cars, and they're great, but there's a whole world of circuit racing where it appears to be more money, and there's less for you to do, or less for you to worry about, and no trees to hit. And he went, yeah, we've done a bit, but we've never really got into it. And now it's flying, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a really big part of what we do. And
do you struggle with it? Because roundy racing, which is not you, is it? You must look at it and go...
I was at Silverstone yesterday, Chris.
You must look at it and just think, why are they doing this?
I was at Silverstone yesterday, round the GP circuit.
In what?
Early 911.
Early 911.
2 weeks ago.
What did you do down the back straight? Have a cup of tea or what?
It's a long old straight, but
Are you beginning to enjoy it?
Yes, I haven't done a race yet, apart from go-karting with you now and then.
Come and do Spa 6 hours. We have to get you into that.
Well, a couple of weeks we were at Spa with the 2 Litre Cup and Peter Auto.
Are you pedalling in that or not?
No. I spent a day in the BMW of all things, going around Spa to do some licence qualification. So I am enjoying it, and yesterday I actually tentatively booked a day with a coach to go and have a look at how slow he is compared to me around a racetrack, because I think I'll beat everyone. No, I think I had a day with a client the other day in Wales. So he's a race chap, very, very nice guy, owns lots of lovely cars, and I took him for a day. He came ice driving with us, and then I took him to Wales.
Yeah.
Walters Arena, safari car, trees, everything that we've all dreamed of. And at the end of the day, firstly, he was surprisingly good. Surprisingly is the wrong word. He was better than I imagined. He's got brilliant car control and can do everything very, very proficiently. And all I wanted out of that day was for him to go back onto a race circuit with the confidence that he can throw a car around and be perfectly all right. Because these cars, don't forget, are all running skinny tyres, so they all move. And the trick is, how sideways do you have to be?
And how sideways would you not be before you're scrubbing
speed?
Yeah.
But when I overlay data from racing drivers, there are areas where I'm much quicker on a given racetrack. So it's the thing about trying to learn the balance, and I'm genuinely interested.
And also, there are areas where you're not quicker.
Yes, but they're easy to sort.
Are they?
Yeah, that's.
I mean, you do come across as a very modest man at the moment.
Well, trying to, yeah, it's difficult.
And on that bombshell, that's the end of part 1. Come back for part 2, where Richard explains why he's a greater driver than Ayrton Senna. Collecting Cars, the safe, smart and simple way to buy and sell collectible cars. An online auction platform for the UK and Europe. Follow us on Instagram at Collecting Cars and also collectingcars.com.
The CollectingCars.com podcast with Chris Harris and Edward Lovett.
Welcome back to part 2 of this Collecting Cars podcast with Richard Tuthill. A little bit of social media handles. We are at Collecting Cars on Instagram. There's a Twitter one, but no one uses Twitter anymore. Richard is at Tuthill Porsche, I think. He doesn't quite know. He has a man that does that for him. But have a look and you'll see lots of pictures of his brand new, lovely shed. Now, Richard, first of all, the driving thing, okay? People don't know how handy you are. He was a Prodrive all-star back in the day. So Prodrive had a series of youngsters that were going to come through the ranks and become the next Richard Burns. And you were one of them. What was that like, being a part of that team?
Well, I don't know whether I was one of them, but I was involved. I don't know what I was or what I am, but what was lovely was being involved with that company at that time when they were doing amazing stuff with Burnsy and McRae, and they're 4 miles away from us. And I still have a note from DR saying that if I ever want a job, I just have to call him because I worked for him once. So anyway, I haven't had to call him, but
yet.
Yeah.
So if you want to work on the front desk at a hotel in Cornwall, then you probably can. Yeah.
It might not be good.
I did actually see, interrupting very quickly, but David Richards, they posted on the Prodrive Instagram the other day, one of their 83-year-old employees that just retired and worked there for 25 years and had been given a golden pass to always come back. I thought it was brilliant. And there was, I think a couple of weeks ago, they did a similar post and someone had retired at 76. So they really, they worked them to the bone there.
No, well, I know that chap because when I used to live in Deddington, I used to nearly run him over every night because I think he was still walking to work. Anyway, no, it was a good time, and I was exposed to some lovely cars and some lovely projects.
Can we now dispel the myth of the Colin McRae edition, first generation Impreza? So they did They made some Prodrive looking Imprezas because this car exploded on the scene in sort of '94, didn't it? Out of nowhere, there was this new hero car from Japan. It was quirky. It was a rally winner. Everyone wanted one on the road. It was just the ultimate success. It was what every car company wants from motorsport, is to build a car that succeeds in competition that then people want to buy on the road because of that. And that was a great example of it. And anyhow, so they did some special editions called a Prodrive one. They put a Recaro seat in it and they painted it blue, basically.
And some gold wheels.
Yeah, and they became super famous. Richard, how were those put together?
I did them all in a shed.
In the
shed near Gaydon. And what it consisted of was me, a shed full of cars. There was a little storeroom where we kept the Speedline wheels. The hardest part of it was sticking the plaques on, but I did every single one.
Every single plaque?
Yeah, so I have no idea why I was given that job, but I think they needed rid of me for a couple of months. So I used to fit the wheels, the seats, the plaque. I remember taking sort of a foot-long baguette that I would have made myself at home, and I remember having a cheeky nap middle of the day because it was me. There was no one. I didn't have to report to anyone. So if there are any of those cars still out there and the plaque is a tad wonky, I'll rectify it.
You will find
FOC.
I can remember people with the cars saying, yeah, it's a really special one. It come out of the factory doors at Prodrive. And then he told me about the process. Let's not tell anyone that.
I was talking about one of them yesterday, funny. That, a P1 and a 22B. And the relevance of all of them. Anyway, amazing,
which is the
time.
one to have?
I don't know.
A 22B will always be considered the homologation car, but to drive, the P1 was the nicest one of those cars that I ever drove.
When I was asked a question yesterday, I rang Ollie Clark.
He knows everything.
And he knows everything, so...
How much power does he get from those things now?
Oh, ridiculous. You wait till his new Time Attack car comes out.
That quite appeals to me, Time Attack.
Yes.
I quite like the purity of one lap.
Mentalist.
No rules. Have you followed this at all?
What's this? He's building these.
So they're him and Matt, legends. And
what's the company?
Roger Clark Motorsport.
Yeah.
They sell primarily Mitsubishi and Subaru performance parts, and they do it beautifully. And then Ollie works on the parts. Matt's just a crazy mechanic engineer.
Yeah.
So he sits in the workshop building a car, and every 4 or 5 years they produce another one for Time Attack series, which is
for themselves.
So yeah. and then Ollie drives it.
And you go to a circuit, and it's pretty much unlimited. Well, there are classes, but you can basically make what you want, and it's a very simple deal. It's how fast can you do a lap?
Type in
any circuit, or they?
Well, they have specific events, don't they? But they do them.
It's a sort of MSA series.
There is a proper series, but they use the major circuits in the UK.
Yeah.
But I like the simplicity of this one lap. And you can turn up with a 1,000 horsepower Skyline and basically just manhandle the thing
from stationary, is it?
No, it's flying lap, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know, but Google Gobstopper and life will never be the same. So he's the man I rang. Good chap. But no, the driving thing was what I did, and I was really good when I drove every day, and now I'm a little bit disappointed in my tardiness because I don't drive in the same way. And that's what's really interesting about driving, is if you commit to being a driver, then you become bloody good. Now, Chris, you drive more cars than any of us, and you spend more laps in cars than any of us, and
I'm
hence
still no good.
You are good, annoyingly so.
I've googled Gobstopper, and there's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and the other is that the one?
Maybe add Subaru on, because otherwise you might see some really bad stuff.
Yeah,
add
don't
Subaru on the end of it.
Google Gobstopper; it'll say something very different.
But no, it's all about it's as ever. It's all about time behind the wheel, and in 911 terms, that's where I spend. That's all I drive.
So, what is the ultimate Richard Tuthill 911?
Well, it's got no power. It's got brilliant handling. And because of budget, it's probably 912 based.
Okay.
But so they don't sound right.
So obviously, Porsche, as we were talking about, values, etc., you can spend an awful lot of money on a 911 of some derivative. But I guess you can have a great 911 or Porsche experience for £10,000 or £20,000.
No,
not even with a ratty 912.
No, 912s have sailed as well. So the great thing about a 912,
a 912 that's very clean it has sail, but you can get a ratty car with a bit of rust in the door.
Oh, you could, and then you could call it. What would you call it? One of those things that looks like an
outlaw.
Shit.
A rat rod.
One of them.
Yeah.
So then you just justify not doing a nice.
Yeah, but it still drives like a 912.
Yeah, you can. So you'd take a 912, and then within a day you'd have a 911 engine in it, because the 4-cylinder engine, as much as you try, and I think Porsche have just recently proved this yet again, is not a great. And in fact, Subaru's the only box you've ever made. I know we should be talking about Subaru, but
why do they sound good? That's a good question for you. But just
why does a 4-pot engine?
Why does the 4-pot in a Subaru,
Impressive.
a flat 4, have so much character, sound so good, and feel actually special? And yet the current Boxster engine is. Have you driven one?
yes,
I mean,
I go on an isolation
dreadful.
one. Yeah.
What, the engine's dreadful or the noise is dreadful?
Everything's dreadful. It's just wrong. I mean, it's quite quick, but just the way it goes about its business is unpleasant. It's no secret that the next Boxster won't have a 4-cylinder engine.
I don't know why Subarus sound good, and Beetles 356s, 912s, and Boxsters sound bad. I don't know. But what I'm
So
saying
you take the 4-cylinder out, you put a 2-litre in.
Probably 2 litre, maybe 2.2 to give you a little bit more torque on the
Yeah.
road. And you make a car, because talking about driving cars, we can't drive fast anywhere.
Yeah.
So let's just drive slowly, but on the door handles,
Yeah.
so that we're not doing something totally irresponsible. And if
Yeah.
it stops and handles well, that's all I want.
So when our auction platform is live, which we're recording this at on the 1st of May, I think we need to try and find a Richard Tuthill back to basics 911 experience
There'll be
to
something in a
auction
shed
on our
somewhere.
platform. We'll have a little dig around in one of the old sheds.
I own 8 912s, plus a few body shells. I own a right-hand drive one, which is beautiful. Now, this is not part of this discussion.
Okay, fine.
But I own, I think, 8 left-hand. I had a bit of a thing 3-4 years ago, and I thought I'd buy. My father bought me, and my brother and my sister, a Beetle.
Yeah.
So I thought I'd buy my 3 kids a 912, and they're all sheds, and they're all sitting in a barn. But yeah, we could spam one up.
And you're making a 912R, is that right? Centre seat.
That's not official, but it's one of many stupid ideas I have. We'll see.
Go back to the sheds.
Yeah.
So your place, new facility, is all great. You've finally got some order, which must make life much easier for you, because it was a series of rabbit warrens, really, wasn't it? So, and there was stuff stored everywhere, because your father's a legend and would just buy stuff over time, as any business like yours does. You buy stuff and stick it away for a rainy day. What's the best thing that you ever just stumbled across in a shed?
We were searching for Solex carburetors 2 years ago because of this 2-litre cup and because of the demand for Solexes, which are tricky. And the old man said, "Okay, just give me a couple of hours." And he went away, and I'd say I'll give him a day, but within a day, I think he produced 8 sets of Solex carburetors. Obviously, none of which were recorded on stock. No one knew the location, and no doubt they came from multi-location. So that was a bit of a find. He's just bought a business in Spain.
Was this the one you were talking about
Yeah.
a year ago?
Yeah, he did it. And so we've just had 9 40-foot containers of classic Porsche parts. turn up.
AKA crap.
So, no, we call it DOS, Dad's Old Shit.
Dad's old shit.
There's a part number on the system for it. So he's at the age of 70.
Forgive us for the noise here, because we are
We're
in
Gerardo
the
& Co,
Gerardo
Italian
& Co hospitality, and they have got the coffee grinder going on upstairs.
So
Dad's
he's
Dad's old
75
shit,
or 76. And this is a project I'm not allowed to be involved in.
Yeah.
He's made that very clear. He's trying to rope my sister into it.
Oh,
Anyway,
that was it. Your sister was involved.
9 40-foot containers, and he's sorting through it on a daily basis. I don't know where he gets his energy from, but there's some quite interesting stuff in that.
Any
I had
Solexes in there?
a couple of Solexes, some lovely RS seats. I've seen some aluminium Speedster seats, lots of CBA, Oscar lights, proper things.
Have you still got my original ducktail somewhere?
Which
did
technically
that-
is mine, but yes.
Is it technically yours now?
I have to ask Paul.
Given that you own most of the cars that I call mine anyway. So.
Anyway, no, I don't know where he gets his energy from, but it's a real thing.
And what's the future of all this? Because I'm at the coalface of my day job, dealing with mobility and how people get around the place and how transportation works for us as individuals, the motor car feels like it's on its way out. And yet you've got more and more demand for old cars and people to go racing in them, haven't you?
Yeah, interesting. My thought is, which is as ever very uneducated, is I'm looking quite hard at driver experiences. We have done over the years some extraordinary stuff, and actually we're watching you on telly. You're going to some amazing parts of the world, having driving adventures, doing stuff. So what I am about to turn my main focus on is driving experiences. So we already
with the 911.
With yes, and one other group of cars I'm interested in, but mostly 911s as normal.
2 CVs?
Not 2 CVs. Not 2 CVs. We obviously run a brilliant ice driving experience, which is 15 years
below
old.
zero?
Below zero. Which is great. 15 years old and still as fun as the first day probably you and I spent on.
If you've got a group of mates and want to go and have a bit of fun skidding around on the snow, check out Below Zero.
Yeah, I think the last gallon of fuel is used on a lake, isn't it, or down a stage with snowbanks?
Yeah,
if that's what you do.
Yeah, so that's amazing. When we go, I've got 5 cars in Morocco today, charging around on a rally.
God, is that the one that we did the launch event with Michelle Mouton?
I watched that video last week as well. Yeah, so that's based in Marrakesh, and then obviously we love Kenya for the safari rally. So what I'm looking at is. People are going to need places to go and drive their cars because I don't think we're going to be able to drive as we do now. So we're going to have to create occasions.
Yeah.
And I think that might be the future of what we get involved in.
What about stage rallying? Can you see that carrying on?
I think increasingly it's become quite tricky to put on stage events in a cost-effective manner and B, conform with safety requirements. Especially, for example, in Italy, you have to have an ambulance every 5 kilometres now, if you're going to put a stage on, because of various incidents that have happened recently. It's interesting. They need to amalgamate more events in one and have fewer but better quality events, I think.
Okay, last question to you. Without doubt, the most harebrained thing you've ever done since I've known you, and you've done some pretty ambitious things, was to enter RGT with a 997 Cup car and bolt Francois Delacour in the driver's seat. I mean, I hope you look back on it now and think it's one of the coolest things you've ever done.
Simple answer, yes. One of the coolest things I've ever done. Financially disastrous, as with all the best things. We are still we have one RGT car that runs, or has run, but it's been off the road for a year due to FIA politics, and that's the saddest thing of all of this, is that trying to do great things in motorsport these days is becoming increasingly tiresome, to the point where it makes you not want to do stuff. Yeah. And I think that's a terrible shame, because it does take. So I can't completely claim the rights to RGT, but Romain Dumas, myself, certainly were pushing like hell as a pair of privateers to get these cars out on the World Championship stage. Yeah. And it's really tricky. But on the back of it, Porsche are looking at bringing
Cayman.
The Cayman.
Yeah.
Our Bath did some. Our Baths.
What have I seen? A Cayman
Dumas,
GT4 rally car
Dumas drove one in Germany.
At Reading the other day.
It as a zero car on an event.
They might. It's probably doing the rounds.
I think I saw it at Reading. Yeah.
Well, they're looking at it. But the point being, without people pushing at the beginning, spending their own money, this stuff just doesn't happen, and it's becoming increasingly tricky.
But he is the man, though, isn't he, Delacour? He is the man.
I spent one day with him 5 years ago, and it's one of the best days of my life. Even going from the hotel to the airport was fun. My son's spent 3 days with him on a French exchange, and youngest son is going there this summer with a bit of luck. He is wonderful. Absolutely wonderful.
The normal rules of the world don't apply to him, do they?
If I won the lottery tomorrow, I probably would pay for him to be driving a Toyota World Rally car for a full season next year in the World Championship, because he genuinely believes he will beat Ogier, Latvala, Oit Tanak, and anyone else you can name, Meek. And I think he'd have a good shout. He's fitter now than he was when he was 21. He's an extraordinary bloke. I love him to pieces, and as crazy it was brilliant.
Well, that's been a lovely chat. Thank you for coming along. Best of luck with everything. We'll keep an eye on it. Love the new shed. The Singer, both of us are really excited about. That should be available for people to drive by the end of the year, hopefully. And I'm sure you've got other interesting projects coming along, and I look forward to avoiding you on a racetrack sometime soon. Thank you, Richard Tuthill, and thank you, Edward.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, John.